So I recently had to deal with a situation that involved my home, a corrupt homeowner association, and the most power-obsessed president imaginable. This wasn't just about petty fines or rule enforcement. This was a full-blown scam designed to push us out of our own house. And when they targeted my disabled wife, thinking she was an easy victim, they had no idea who they were challenging. Let me start from the beginning. But first, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. When Lisa and I moved into Birch Estates, we thought we had finally found the perfect home. A quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, and the kind of suburban charm that made you feel like you'd finally made it. After years of apartment living, we were eager to settle into a place where Lisa, who uses a wheelchair, could move freely without navigating tight hallways and unreliable elevators. The house itself was a dream, a spacious single-story, wide doorways, and a backyard large enough for weekend barbecues. It was everything we'd imagined. And then we met Tina Kruger. She introduced herself before we had even finished unpacking. A short woman with a strict bob and an even more severe attitude. She showed up on our porch holding a clipboard like a sergeant, inspecting the troops. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, smiling tightly. "I'm Tina Kruger, head of the Homeowner Association. We like to make sure new residents are familiar with the regulations." Lisa and I exchanged a look. We hadn't even finished moving in, and we were already being monitored. "Everything in the welcome packet," Tina continued, tapping the clipboard. "But I like to personally introduce myself to ensure everyone is on the same page about our neighborhood standards." I forced a polite smile. "Appreciate it. We're just settling in." Her gaze flickered toward Lisa's wheelchair, then passed her toward our driveway. "I did notice you're installing some kind of structure." Lisa didn't hesitate. "A wheelchair ramp?" Tina's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Annoyance? Displeasure? "We do have guidelines about exterior modifications," she said, voice smooth but clipped. "We want to maintain a consistent aesthetic. I'll need to check if that was authorized." Lisa's fingers tightened on her armrest. "Under federal law, we are allowed reasonable accommodations," she said evenly. Tina let out a short, light laugh like Lisa had just said something adorable. "Of course," she said. "We just have to make sure it doesn't disrupt the community appearance look." And with that, she gave us another thin smile and walked away. I should have known then. Tina wasn't done with us. The harassment started subtly. At first, it was the notices. A formal notice about our unauthorized ramp. A warning that Lisa's wheelchair-accessible van was too large for overnight parking. A complaint about the visual inconsistency caused by the ramp's design, even though it perfectly matched our house's trim. Then things escalated. One morning, we woke up to find our garbage cans mysteriously gone. A few days later, a neighbor, one we hadn't even met yet, warned us that the homeowner association was discussing our home at their meetings. "She's saying you're lowering property rates," the neighbor whispered, glancing around as if Tina had spies hiding in the bushes. Lisa remained calm, but I could see it. The way she clenched her jaw, the fire behind her eyes. She knew what was happening. This wasn't about rules. It was about control. Then came the final blow. A petition taped to our front door, signed by multiple neighbors, demanding a hearing about our violations. Someone had scrolled a note in the margins. "Maybe this isn't the right place for you," I snapped. I stormed over to Tina's house, letter in hand. She answered the door with the same fake smile as if she'd been expecting me. "What's this?" I demanded, holding up the petition. Tina didn't even blink. "Just community members expressing opinions, concerns." My voice was rising. "Now, my wife's basic accessibility is a concern." Tina's lips pressed together, her expression calculated. "Let's not make this personal. The board will be reviewing the issue at the next meeting." I wanted to tear into her, to tell her exactly what I thought of her thinly veiled bias. But Lisa, always the strategist, placed a hand on my arm. She studied Tina for a moment before speaking. "We'll be there," she said simply. And then in the quietest, most chillingly confident voice I'd ever heard, she added, "I hope you're ready." Tina's smirk faltered. Just for a second she had no idea what was coming. The official Summons arrived 3 days later, stamped with the Homeowner Association's golden seal and wrapped in stiff legalese. It read like something out of a courtroom drama. Lisa and I were required to appear before the board for a formal hearing regarding our adjustments. The language was sterile, clinical, as if this were just a procedural process. But I could read between the lines. This wasn't a meeting. This was an attack. Lisa read the letter carefully, her eyes scanning each line with a lawyer's focus. I could see the faintest twitch in her jaw, the only sign that she was irritated. They didn't even give us time to prepare, muttered, pacing the kitchen. They're forcing our decision. Lisa set the paper down, lacing her fingers together. She looked calm. No, she said simply. They're rushing. I frowned. What's the difference? She tapped a fingernail against the paper. They're making their move too soon. That means they're afraid of failure, I scoffed. Afraid of what? Lisa's lips curled into a knowing smile. Of what happens when I push back. That made me pause. For days we had assumed this was about control, about a homeowner association president on a power trip wielding fines and rules like weapons. But Lisa had been watching Tina closely, and something about this felt hurried. She flipped the notice over, skimming the list of violations attached. The usual nonsense was there. The ramp, the van, the aesthetic issues. But then, at the bottom was something new. Failure to comply may result in fines, legal action, or property liens. I stopped pacing. Property liens. Lisa and I exchanged a look. Wait, I said slowly, they wouldn't actually try to. Lisa didn't even blink. Yes, they would. That's when I understood. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was financial warfare. Homeowner associations could fine homeowners, sure. But liens? That meant they were preparing to take it one level further. Rack up enough unpaid fines, and suddenly the homeowner association had control over your property. Keep resisting, they could move to seize it. And the worst part, it was lawful. Lisa exhaled slowly, her lawyer's mind already racing. They're building a case, she said, trying to make us look like chronic violators. That way, when they move to enforce the lien, it won't look personal. It'll look like we forced their hand. I clenched my fists. So what do we do? Lisa's smile didn't waver. We let them think they've won. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I trusted her. While I struggled to keep my anger in check, Lisa went to work. For the next 2 days, she barely left her office. I'd passed by and see her buried in legal statutes, case law, homeowner association bylaws, cross-referencing everything. At first, I thought she was just preparing our defense. She wasn't. She was setting a trap. The night before the hearing, I found her at the kitchen table, a stack of paper spread out in front of her. She had a half smile on her face, like she just solved a riddle. Remember when I said they rushed? She asked. I nodded. She slid a document across the table. It was a real estate transaction record. I skimmed the first few lines, my stomach twisting. The homeowner association wasn't just enforcing rules. They were flipping houses. The pattern was clear. Homeowner association fines stack up. Homeowners get pressured into selling homes, get bought at a bargain and flipped for massive profit. And guess whose name appeared multiple times in these transactions? Tina Kruger. She wasn't just the homeowner association president. She was a real estate manipulator. Lisa leaned back, folding her arms. She's been doing this for years, and now she picked the wrong family. A sudden loud noise outside made me jolt. I rushed to the window. A tow truck. I barely had time to react before a worker stepped out, clipboard in hand. They were towing Lisa's van. I flew out the door. Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? The driver barely spared me a glance. Got a removal order from the homeowner association, he said, holding up a form. An authorized oversized vehicle. I felt rage surge through me. Lisa's only means of mobility was being hauled away like an abandoned car. I turned to Lisa, expecting anger, but when I looked at her, she was smiling. Not a happy smile, a cold, confident smile. She watched the truck pull away and murmured, "They just made their biggest mistake." Tina thought she had backed us into a trap. She had no idea what was coming. The courtroom was packed. Homeowner association board members huddled together like vultures, whispering among themselves. A few smug neighbors, probably the ones who signed the petition, had come to watch the disabled woman and her foolish husband get put in their place. And at the center of it all, Tina Kruger, seated at the homeowner association's table like a queen ruling over court. She smirked as she whispered to her lawyer. Then, loud enough for us to hear, she scoffed, "This won't take long." Lisa didn't react. She simply adjusted her wheelchair, smoothed the crease in her blazer, and waited. The judge called the case. The homeowner association's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie, his tone smooth and controlled. "Your Honor, the homeowners have repeatedly refused to comply with homeowner association regulations. Their modifications, while understandable, violate neighborhood appearance standards which this court has upheld time and time again." Lisa remained silent. She didn't flinch. She let him talk. Tina leaned back, smug, as her lawyer continued. "We're simply enforcing community rules." Rules. The defendants were fully aware of when they moved in. If we allow every homeowner to pick and choose, we have no community at all. A good argument. If Lisa had been just another homeowner, it might have worked. But Lisa wasn't ordinary. She reached into her bag, pulled out a single sheet of evidence and placed it on the table. Then finally, she spoke. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but firm, "before I respond to the homeowner association's claims, I'd like to clarify something." She turned, fixing Tina with a measured gaze. "This isn't about rules. This is about bias." Tina let out a short, dismissive laugh. Lisa smiled. "Would you say homeowner association policies are enforced fairly among all homeowners?" she asked. The lawyer straightened. "Of course." Lisa's smile widened. She picked up the document, a picture. She held it up for the entire courtroom to see. A neighbor's house, one of the very same neighbors who had signed the petition against us. And there, clear as day, was a custom-built, unapproved porch extension. Lisa flipped to the next photo. Another house, a non-regulation barrier. The next, an illegal storage. Lisa laid the photos out on the table, one by one, each a direct contradiction to the homeowner association's so-called strict enforcement. The judge leaned forward, examining. Lisa laced her fingers together. "Why is it," she asked, "that my home is the only one being legally targeted for these violations?" Tina shifted uncomfortably. Lisa continued. "Homeowner association records show that in the last 5 years, no formal legal actions were taken against any homeowners. Until now." Silence. Lisa let it stretch before flipping the next page. "But let's talk about the ramp." The homeowner association's lawyer jumped at the topic. "Yes. A modification that, while understandable, directly conflicts with homeowner association aesthetic guidelines." Lisa nodded. "And what about the Americans with Disabilities Act?" The lawyer paused. Lisa slid a copy of the ADA's housing policies across the table. "Under federal law, homeowner associations cannot enforce regulations that restrict disabled homeowners' right to accessibility." She pulled out another document. "This," she continued, "is a copy of our formal request for accommodation submitted 6 months ago." The homeowner association ignored it. Tina's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. Lisa flipped to the next page. "And this," she said, "is the homeowner association's official response notice. The date they denied our request 2 weeks later, calling the ramp unattractive." The judge's frown deepened. Lisa turned to him. "Which carries more legal weight, federal law or a homeowner association policy?" Tina's jaw tightened. Lisa wasn't done. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the only reason we are here today is because my family has been specifically singled out. The selective enforcement, the fines, the unjust towing of my medically necessary vehicle. This isn't about property appearance." She leaned forward, sharp, like a blade. "This was about forcing us out." The homeowner association's lawyer was sweating. "Now, Your Honor, I don't believe." Lisa held up one final document. "This," she said, "is a formal request for a state investigation into homeowner association corruption. Tina went rigid. Lisa slid the paperwork forward. Given the evidence presented, I believe there's sufficient cause to examine the financial dealings of the board. Silence. The judge took the document, read it, and nodded. I watched. Tina's hands clench into fists. She had walked into this courtroom thinking she would defeat us. But now she was realizing she had just dug her own downfall. And Lisa was holding the evidence. Tina Kruger sat stone-faced, gripping the edges of the homeowner association's table so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. The courtroom, once filled with smug confidence from her supporters, was eerily silent. But Lisa was just getting started. Your Honor, she continued smoothly, we've already established that the homeowner association has been enforcing rules, selectively choosing which homeowners get to violate regulations without consequence, and which ones get fined into the ground. She adjusted the papers in front of her. But that's only the beginning of the problem. Tina shifted in her chair. Lisa pulled out a thick folder and placed it firmly on the table. This, she said, is a collection of financial statements, property records, and transaction histories related to the homeowner association. Tina's expression barely flickered, but I saw it. The moment of unease. Lisa opened the folder and flipped to the first page. Over the last 5 years, she said, this homeowner association has issued an unprecedented number of fines, many of them against homeowners who coincidentally sold their homes shortly after. The judge leaned forward slightly. Go on. Lisa slid a marked document forward. This is a record of forced property sales. Each of these homes was fined excessively, with violations stacking up until the owners either left voluntarily or were pushed out through homeowner association liens. Tina's lawyer quickly stood. Objection, Your Honor. These are baseless claims. Lisa held up a hand. I'm not done. She turned the next page. And this is where it gets revealing. I watched Tina's throat tighten as she swallowed. Lisa pointed to a specific name listed under the buyer records. Tina Kruger. The judge's gaze snapped to Tina. Lisa's voice was steady, calculated, like a predator toying with its target. In nearly a dozen instances, properties that were fined into foreclosure were later purchased by an investment firm, a firm that, according to official documents, has direct monetary ties to M. Kruger. Gasps rippled through the room. Tina sat rigid, her lawyer shifting uncomfortably beside her. Lisa continued flipping through documents. These homes, she went on, were then resold within a matter of months at an increased value, and in multiple cases, homeowner association fines were mysteriously dropped after a new preferred resident moved in. Lisa set the papers down. Miss Kruger, she said lightly, could you explain why the homeowner association seems to be working in perfect alignment with your personal property dealings? Tina snapped. This is nonsense, she hissed, her voice breaking. I don't have to explain anything to you. Lisa didn't blink. No, she said, but you will have to explain it to the state attorney's office. Tina's entire body went rigid. Lisa picked up one final document, a formal petition for an external review and investigation into homeowner association misconduct. I filed this 2 weeks ago, Lisa said smoothly, after reviewing the financial records and finding discrepancies. Tina's lawyer looked like he was about to collapse. The judge took the document and scanned it. His frown deepened. Miss Carter, you're requesting a state investigation into potential financial corruption? Lisa nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Based on the evidence presented, I believe there's more than enough reason to suspect fraud. Tina shot out of her seat. This is an injustice, she shrieked. You can't. You have no authority. The judge held up a hand, his face like stone. Miss Kruger, sit down. Tina slowly sank back into her chair, but she was visibly trembling. Lisa gave her a small polite smile. Oh, and one more thing. She pulled out a final folder, a thick stack of messages. These, she said, are internal communications between you and various members of the board discussing how to pressure difficult homeowners. Tina went still. Lisa flipped to one page in particular, reading aloud. We need to pressure them until they leave. The fine should be enough, but if not, We can always use parking enforcement or bylaw technicalities. At the end of the day, they'll give in. They always do. Lisa raised her eyes. This was an email sent by you, Miss Kruger. Would you like to explain the context? Tina's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge set the papers aside, steepling his fingers. I will be referring this matter to the State Fraud Division, he said finally, and in the meantime, all homeowner association actions against the Carters are hereby nullified. I heard a strangled noise from Tina's side of the courtroom. Lisa turned to me, her expression calm, but I could see it. The victory in her eyes. Tina had thought she was setting a trap, but she had just walked into one, and Lisa was the one who designed it. Tina Kruger sat frozen, her once perfectly composed expression collapsing by the second. The courtroom filled with homeowner association members who had once cheered her on now stared at her in horrified disbelief. Lisa hadn't just exposed the scheme, she had ripped the entire operation apart, piece by piece. But Lisa wasn't finished. Your Honor, she said smoothly, to enter one final piece of proof into the record, she reached into her bag and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. Tina's fingers twitched. Lisa slid it forward, tapping the cover firmly. These are bank records and internal homeowner association financial statements. I obtained them legally through public records requests and forensic audits. She let the words sink in before adding, and what they show is astonishing. Tina finally found her voice. This is harassment. She spat, her face now bright red. You can't just dig into my history. Lisa tilted her head. You're right, she said. I can't. She flipped open the folder. But the state attorney's office can. Tina's mouth snapped shut. Lisa turned the first page for the last 3 years. The Homeowner Association has collected fines at an unprecedented rate. Those funds, according to official Homeowner Association reports, were supposed to go toward neighborhood services. She flipped to the next page. Then why is it Lisa continued that less than 25% of those funds were actually used for community maintenance? The judge's eyebrows raised. Lisa tapped the document. Meanwhile, large sums of money, tens of thousands of dollars, were transferred to an account under the name of She for effect. Tina Kruger. The room erupted gasps, murmurs. Even the Homeowner Association's own board members were shifting in their seats, eyes darting toward their fearless leader, the woman who had ruled over them without challenge. Tina jerked. Upright. That's a lie, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You can't prove anything. Lisa flipped the page. This is a record of purchases made using Homeowner Association funds, she said casually. Would you like me to read them aloud? Tina lunged forward. You don't have the authority. Lisa ignored her. Luxury handbags, a first-class flight to the Bahamas, a down payment on a vacation home. Lisa tapped the list with a perfectly manicured nail, all charged directly to Homeowner Association accounts. Tina's lawyer, who had been rigidly silent up until now, suddenly stood. Your Honor, I need a moment to consult with my client. Lisa's lips quirked. Oh, you weren't expecting this? The lawyer didn't answer. He was already whispering furiously in Tina's ear. But it was too late. The judge slammed his gavel. Enough, he said sharply. He turned to Lisa. Miss Carter, are you suggesting that Miss Kruger has been stealing Homeowner Association funds? Lisa met his gaze directly. Yes, Your Honor, and I have the proof. To back it up, the judge let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. Then he turned to the uniformed officers standing near the door. Bailiff, he said, notify the fraud division immediately. Tina's face went ghostly pale. Her lawyer stood abruptly. Your Honor, my client is willing to negotiate. Lisa arched a brow. Negotiate what? A plea bargain. Tina's entire body sagged. I watched her, taking in the sheer horror on her face. For years, she had wielded the Homeowner Association like a personal weapon, bullying homeowners, manipulating finances, believing she was invincible. And now, she was just another white-collar criminal about to face justice. One of the officers stepped forward, placing a hand on Tina's arm. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Tina whipped around wild-eyed. You can't arrest me, she shrieked. I haven't done anything wrong. You have no evidence. Lisa let out a soft chuckle. That's not what the documents say. The officers pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Turn around. Tina panicked. She tried to yank away, tried to reach for her lawyer, but no one was coming to her rescue. Her own board members sat in stunned shock, making no move to help. She had ruled them with fear and control, but now that her power was gone, so was their support. The cuffs snapped shut. Tina Kruger, Queen of the Homeowner Association, destroyer of neighborhoods, untouchable tyrant, was led out of the courtroom in chains. And as she passed Lisa, I saw it. The moment she realized exactly what had happened. Lisa had played her from the very beginning. Tina Kruger had spent years ruling this neighborhood like a queen on a throne, treating homeowners like peasants who lived at her mercy. Now, she was gone, dragged out of the courtroom in handcuffs, her expensive suit creased, her carefully styled bob disheveled, and the whispers of the very people she once ruled echoing behind her. The Homeowner Association Board, her former allies, sat in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of horror and panic. None of them had expected this, but Lisa had. She had planned every move, and the game wasn't over yet. The moment the judge ruled in our favor, everything unraveled. The Homeowner Association, fines canceled, the forced towing of Lisa's van deemed unlawful, the lien threats on our home erased. Tina's real estate scam had been uncovered in front of everyone, and the moment the investigation hit the local news, the entire Homeowner Association collapsed. Board members resigned overnight. The homeowners, once too afraid to speak out, began filing claims of their own. And without its leader or its money, the Homeowner Association was finished. Lisa didn't just win, she destroyed the Homeowner Association entirely. But that wasn't the best part. A few months later, we heard a rumor floating around the neighborhood. Tina's house was going up for auction. Her pride and joy, the home she had paraded around as an example of perfect neighborhood standards. And now she couldn't even afford to keep it. Lisa didn't hesitate. She made a call, arranged a meeting, and within a few short weeks, we bought it. The very house Tina Kruger once cherished. The house she had used as proof, a symbol of her power now belonged to us. Lisa handled the paperwork personally, and when the sale was finalized, she made one important decision. The very first thing we did was remodel the entrance. A brand new, state-of-the-art wheelchair ramp. Sleek, modern, impossible to ignore was installed right in front. Lisa stood at the base of it on the day it was finished, running her fingers along the railing, admiring the design. Think she'd like it? I asked, smirking. Lisa smiled. Oh, she'd despise it. We both laughed. The neighborhood had changed. The fear was gone. The intimidation was over. People actually talked to each other now, no longer terrified of Homeowner Association spies lurking in the background. And Tina? Well, last I heard, she wasn't so picky about standards anymore, not from her prison cell.